Coming up on this week's Salt and Sauce Chat Show.
So that was more of a childhood dream. When I was a kid, I desperately wanted to be an astronaut. So when I was 13, I wrote to the Canadian Space Agency saying, how do I become an astronaut? And they sent me back a package of information, which presumably is what they sent to all children who send them such letters, who said, more or less, you need to go into, well, you either need to be a pilot or something specialist like a doctor, or you need to be an engineer. If we leave the oil and gas workers and the communities that depend on that work at the mercy of the big corporations, they don't care. Yeah. They don't care about your community declining. They don't care about your job once you don't work there anymore. They don't have any long-term aims to make Scotland a better place. On the street outside where I live on Leith Walk, we have soup kitchens, working age people queuing for food like the Great Depression. So all of this stuff was already there, but COVID has really brought it to the surface. And I'm hoping that means that people are ready for change. I'm hoping that this can be a change of direction, that we can reshape our society to stop the billionaires from getting richer and richer and richer while the poor get poorer and poorer and poorer.
Welcome along to another episode of the Salt and Sauce Chat Show. I'm David Simmons, and on this week's show, delighted to be joined by a Scottish politician. We've got co-leader of the Scottish Green Party. We've got Lorna Slater on the show. Lorna, thanks for coming on.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, you're very welcome. I want to start right at the beginning. I mean, you were born in Canada, is that right? How did you end up coming over to Scotland?
It's a sort of a mad story, really. So yeah, I was born in Canada. I was born in Calgary, near the Rocky Mountains, and I went to university in Vancouver. And I graduated from the University of British Columbia with a degree in electromechanical engineering. And I'd heard that Britain was short of engineers. So I handed in my thesis and bought a one-way ticket and rocked up in Glasgow.
Never looked back.
Well, exactly. I came for a couple of years and then ended up staying because it's so brilliant here.
Yeah, no, brilliant. I mean, like you said, you're an engineer. What made you pursue a career path down this sort of avenue?
So that was more of a childhood dream. When I was a kid, I desperately wanted to be an astronaut. So when I was 13, I wrote to the Canadian Space Agency saying, how do I become an astronaut? And they sent me back a package of information, which presumably is what they sent to all children who send them such letters, who said, more or less, you need to go into engineering. Well, you either need to be a pilot or something specialist like a doctor, or you need to be an engineer. And so from that moment, I decided I was going to be an engineer. Sadly, I never became an astronaut, but I'm still available. If ESA, I think ESA is actually looking, they're doing an intake. So maybe they can call.
Well, I've seen that apparently in the future there is going to be vacations where you can go to space, but it's going to cost about £5 million or something like that. You never know.
Probably
you never know.
More than I could afford.
Right, I hope this doesn't come across sexist in any way, but imagine the engineering sort of sector, it's quite male dominated, is that right?
Absolutely.
What would you recommend, obviously, this industry to females?
I would. I mean, that's one of the things that always mystifies me, is why women don't take up engineering, because it's really interesting work. And at the moment, engineers really are on the cutting edge of the things that really, really matter to our planet, to our world. Medical advances are nearly all technical. We all interact with the internet and other technology every day. And of course, in my industry, renewable energy, we're every day solving problems, coming up with new ideas that are changing the world, that will help take us to the net zero where we need to be, where we can produce energy sustainably and forever safely for generations to come. And it's so exciting to be able to do that work, to go to work every day and know that what you're doing is making a difference. So I think there's a lot of history there why women are not encouraged into these subjects, and I very much hope it's changing.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, you work in renewable energy. Is there potential here in Scotland to take advantage of renewable energy?
Oh, good heavens, yes. Scotland has so much renewable energy. We have 25% of all the renewable energy in Europe. So if you imagine how big Europe is, we have sort of the largest piece of that renewable energy. So it's something that makes me really excited about Scotland's future, is that we can harness the wind, the tide, our, hydropower from our inland waters, and even solar. There is solar energy in Scotland. Some people joke about that, but there is. So we have all this potential, from which we can power not only ourselves and our society, but we can export that as well. It can be a major export for Scotland.
Yeah, because there's quite a famous quote, I think even Boris Johnson used it as well, that Scotland can become the Saudi equivalent of renewable energy. Could it genuinely be that profitable for us, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. It's almost sort of unlimited what we can do with it. And because it's sustainable, we don't have to shut it all down. So, unfortunately, the oil and gas industry will have to be shut down. It needs to be tapered off. But we do need to make sure that people are working in that industry and the communities that depend on it can transition over to building renewable energy systems and other industries that we can carry forward. It isn't sustainable to keep pulling fossil fuels out of the ground and burning them. We know that's not safe anymore. So yeah, we have all this potential to go for it. Scotland is going to have a great future ahead of it.
Absolutely. So yeah, you basically answered my next question about the jobs in the gas sector and stuff. Will there genuinely be enough open vacancies for these trained people to jump from the oil rigs in the North Sea over to the tidal renewable energy sector, if you like?
Tidal and wind and all the support structure too. And it depends entirely on how well it's managed. So this is one of the reasons why I've got involved in politics, and is because a lot of these things depend on who's managing them, who's making the decisions. If we leave the oil and gas workers and the communities that depend on that work at the mercy of the big corporations, they don't care. Yeah. They don't care about your community declining. They don't care about your job once you don't work there anymore. They don't have any long-term aims to make Scotland a better place. So this is why, in tackling all aspects of the climate, we can't depend on corporations, and it's not up to individuals as well. It really is down to governments. And so the government needs to have a plan. We call it a just transition, meaning that it's fair to people. So there needs to be a plan for that. We can't just be allowed to happen. Otherwise we could see what we saw with the coal industry in the 80s, where whole communities are devastated. And that does not have to happen. We can plan for this. We know how many workers, we know how many trades, we know how many assets, how many quaysides, how many ships, how many oil rigs need decommissioned. All of that is known. We can plan for this, and we can do a really good job of it if we come up with a good plan.
So yeah, so if the government doesn't act, Lorna, is there a chance that these big corporations could come in and just sweep the renewable energy sector away from us?
So that's to some extent has happened in wind energy in the past, that our resources were sort of auctioned off to the highest bidder, which went to international companies, and all the benefits of that have not been seen in Scotland. A lot of the jobs went elsewhere, the supply chain went elsewhere. And we need to stop that from happening with future leases for wind energy and tidal energy, and sort of having much stricter conditions on them about how much comes back to the local community. I think we're putting into our manifesto quite a significant number, about something like 20% of that needs to come back to the local community. It needs to prioritize Scottish jobs, and it needs to make sure that Scottish supply chains get used, that we're not buying stuff cheaply from plants around the planet who don't have good health and safety, who don't have good environmental records, that we can keep that in Scotland. And I think there's scope for a really big green industrial revolution in Scotland. Actually, we can really revive our industries.
Yeah, how bad is the whole climate change thing? Obviously, we hear the likes of David Attenborough saying it's he's worried about, after he passes on and stuff, who's going to pick this up. Am I right in saying that you visited, was it Antarctica in 2019? Did this really open your eyes, that trip?
It absolutely did. So I spent a year on a course with women from around the world studying leadership and climate change. And these were specifically women in the sciences and engineering, because the idea was to try and link up what scientists know about the climate catastrophe that's looming and what politicians aren't doing. And that's, I think, the sort of really frustrating thing is that when the Paris Agreement was signed, like 5 years ago or so now, every country that signed that said, right, we're going to work together to stop global warming at 1.5 degrees. And no country anywhere has done anything. And the emissions continue to go up and up and up. We didn't choose 1.5 degrees because 1.5 degrees is safe. We chose that because 2 degrees is very bad. At 2 degrees of warming, all coral reefs are dead, and we start to struggle to grow basic food crops. There are worldwide water shortages. We already see the Arctic on fire, Australia on fire, California on fire. We see devastating floods everywhere, including in the UK. There were fires in Scotland, forest fires in Scotland. This is happening now, and it will only get worse. If we get to 3.5 degrees of warming, which we could get to within our lifetimes, by the time the climate strikers are my age, we could be at 3.5 degrees of warming if we don't do something urgent. Well, don't do everything urgently. At 3.5 degrees of warming, the water in Edinburgh is up as far as the Leith Links, and every coastal city in the world is inundated. So we're talking about evacuations of millions and millions of people, not that far into the future. Certainly, I'll be very, very old woman, but possibly within my lifetime, but definitely within the lifetime of the climate strikers. It's so very urgent. Not only do we have to stop emissions, I mean, I'm not saying it's possible to stop them tomorrow, but to ramp them down to zero, we have to suck a lot of the carbon that's already in the atmosphere out of the atmosphere by doing things like rewilding, growing forests, putting peat bogs back, making sure our wetlands are healthy. That kind of thing can help pull that carbon back out of the atmosphere. It's a question of doing everything all at once right now. We can't just do a little bit here and a little bit there and hope for the best. There's a really good analogy actually in how the COVID crisis was handled. And I think we can all see how badly that went when government said, well, just wash your hands a bit and we'll see how it goes, especially when the Prime Minister's going, oh, well, I shook hands with everybody in the hospital. You know, doing little bits at a time and seeing how it goes it didn't cut it for COVID, and it's not going to cut it for the climate catastrophe.
Yeah, no, I absolutely get that. And while we're talking about COVID, just a couple of things. I mean, obviously the whole pandemic's it's in our face every single day. What sort of impact has this had on the battle against climate change? Has it held things back? Is that kind of been put on the back burner slightly, or?
So I think it's brought to a head a lot of issues that were already quite serious. The inequality in our society, how people, even working people, can't afford to feed their families, how young people can't afford houses, how landlords are ripping off tenants. For example, the students who had to pay their rents, even though they couldn't go to university, that there's this huge separation between people who own property and can keep buying more and more property that they don't themselves need to live in, and whole generations of people who will never own their own home. That I think COVID has brought all this stuff more to the surface. People who never expected to be unemployed are suddenly living on benefits and going, oh my goodness, this is inhumane. Nobody can live on this. It's not dignified. On the street outside where I live on Leith Walk, we have soup kitchens, working age people queuing for food, like the Great Depression. So all of this stuff was already there, but COVID has really brought it to the surface. And I'm hoping that means that people are ready for change. I'm hoping that this can be a change of direction, that we can reshape our society to stop the billionaires from getting richer and richer and richer while the poor get poorer and poorer and poorer. That can't keep going. There needs to be a rebalancing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're standing in the next election. As I mentioned, you're part of the Scottish Greens. You're the co-leader, if you like. How did your involvement in politics all come about? So I'm what we call a surger. So after the independence referendum in 2014, so previously I had never been involved in politics, never in any way. I'd voted always, and I would always vote Green when I could, but I'd never been involved. But there was a sense after the 2014 referendum of an opportunity missed. There was a chance to do something differently, a chance to rethink our country. And I just thought, you know what? I want to be part of that. I want to get involved in that. I want a chance for things to be done differently. And so I joined the party 2 weeks after that independence referendum, but I wasn't the only one. About our membership quadrupled in that time. We went from about 2,000 members nationally to 10,000. Wow. And you can see that now the result of that now we are a big party. We are, we're involved in budget debates every year. We're getting invited to the leaders' debates. We are now a major party, and that was all part of that surge. So it's been a very exciting time to be Green. Yeah, I mean, back then you supported Scottish independence, is that right? I did vote for Scottish independence. Is that still your view at the moment, or would you? Absolutely. Absolutely my view. I'm not Scottish. I have no Scottish ancestry. You can tell I'm in no way Scottish, but I think that the UK is broken. I think, 800 and counting unelected lords, including hereditary lords. I think a commitment to nuclear weapons. Now with Brexit, the first past the post system means that we don't have a democratic system. We keep getting Tory governments, even though most people don't vote for them.
It just shows that the UK is broken and no one, not a single party, has a credible case or for reforming it. No major political party is suggesting significant reform. So I think Scotland has a choice to either kind of go down with the Brexit ship or do something different. And as I said, we have an opportunity in an independent Scotland to rethink our constitution, to write into our constitution fundamental human rights, not just things like the right to vote and the right to free religion, which of course would be in there, but what about like the right to housing, the right to food, the right to medical care? Those are actually human rights, but they're not contained in any constitution anywhere in the world. We could be a world first in that. We could embed those things so that every person in Scotland has a right to life. It's not enough to say we have a right to life if we're letting people starve or letting them live in the street. We can do better than that. And I think that's a really exciting thing to think about, to be at the start of a new nation.
Absolutely. The biggest name, if you like, of recent sort of years to tackle climate change or really go viral with it, if you like, was a young girl, that Greta Thunberg.
She wonderful?
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, she went viral online. She recently challenged the Scottish Government, advising them that they're not doing enough to tackle climate change. Is that right?
Absolutely. So the Scottish Government has some exciting targets, and the Greens were happy to help negotiate those targets with the government. But now it's time for action. We have to actually do something. We need to set a date, like Denmark has done, the date by which we will stop pulling oil and gas out of the North Sea. We need to commit to things like a road building moratorium, no more expanding of roads. All you get when you build more roads is more traffic. We need instead to stop subsidizing the oil and gas industries, stop subsidizing, because we give billions of pounds to these industries. Take that money and invest in things like railroads so that everyone in Scotland has affordable public transportation to take them all over the country. Invest in better bus services, particularly in rural areas where the bus services are expensive and sporadic. Let's make sure that we can put that money that used to go to the oil and gas industries where it needs to go to build a better Scotland.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's the Green Party. They've been in the press recently as well. I think I read somewhere that they've come to a sort of agreement with the SNP government about free school meals and stuff in primary children. Is that correct?
That's absolutely it. So the Scottish government is a minority government. So every year, in order to pass the budget, they need to work with another party to do that. And of course, so some parties say we won't work with the government and they sit on their hands and they won't help. And of course, we would rather they didn't negotiate with the Tories or the Lib Dems or a party that we don't consider progressive. So we always enter into negotiations. And actually, we think that the voting public like to see political parties working together and cooperating. And we actually can negotiate some pretty powerful things because they can't pass a budget without us. So you're exactly right. We've been able to negotiate free school meals for all primary children, and that will continue on during holidays as well. And what a difference that's going to make. We've also negotiated for cash payments, pandemic payments of £330 to go to Scotland's poorest families to help them through the last days of the pandemic. I've got a list here in front of me. We had negotiated last year the free bus travel for under 19s, but that's going to be up to anyone under 21. And that's not just good for young people, because young people can get to school or to work or to see friends and family for free, but actually for families as well, because if you're taking the kids out for the day to see Granny or to see one of the Scotland's beautiful attractions, you can take the kids for free. And what a great thing that will be to allow people to get out and enjoy Scotland properly, especially after we've all been locked in for so long. Absolutely.
In January, the Greens published a transport proposal that would see a tunnel across the River Forth. Is that possible? Is that from Leith to Kirkcaldy? It's hopefully going to shorten journey times. I mean, talk to us a bit about this. Is it still in the early stages, or is there a possibility? We've got a Clyde tunnel in Glasgow. Is there a chance we could get a fourth tunnel here in Edinburgh?
So this was a really interesting research paper because we have such a strong commitment to investing in Scotland and to investing in public transportation. We commissioned a research paper from industry experts and engineers about what the best way is to upgrade Scotland's railways. And so this is what they report that they've come back with. So this is industry experts saying that you have to deal with this bottleneck that we have across the Forth. And their best solution, their best engineering expert solution is to build a tunnel. Now, I don't know the details of exactly where that would go or how that would look, but it's the kind of visionary thinking that we need for a future Scotland. If we're to keep people moving and have the thriving economy that we know we can have, yeah, let's do some of these big infrastructure projects.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're the co-leader of the Scottish Green Party with Patrick Harvey, like we discussed earlier. What seat is it that you're going to be standing for at this year's election?
So I am standing both in the constituency of Edinburgh Northern and Leith, where I live, and also I am second on the Lothian list.
Perfect. And so the election, it's in May this year, isn't it?
8 weeks from now.
8 weeks, so there we go. So we need to get out and vote. There's a couple of other things I want to talk to you about, because I seen there was a thing online when I was doing my research when I knew I was going to be speaking to you, Lorna. It was a piece that STV done, and I quote the headline: "It's not every day you see a politician flying themselves in front of a flying trapeze doing front flips." You attended circus school, didn't you?
That's right. Yes, I did.
Tell us about this. This is really interesting.
So a friend of mine bought me a flying trapeze lesson for my 40th birthday. It's a thing you can do. You can just go and do it. You go and pay your money. They do hen parties and like kids' birthday parties. So my friend bought me this lesson and I went on the flying trapeze and I came down off of it going, that is the coolest thing I've ever done in my whole life. And so I just started going back every week. And it's one of these, you know how some hobbies are really addictive? I really got into it. And I went from going once a week to going 2 times a week, 3, 4, to the point where I was training kind of 5 times a week and picking up other circus disciplines. So circus, I mean, when you think of the circus, you think of jugglers, tightrope walkers, and acrobats and aerialists. So I'm an aerialist. That means I hang from things. So trapezes and ropes and what we call aerial silks, which is like fabric that hangs down. So I was studying aerialist stuff for couple of years, really, just in the evenings, and the Glasgow Circus School started what they call a foundation course, so a 4-month full-time course to learn circus arts. And I thought, well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so I applied and was accepted. And that was amazing, to train 4 months full-time with the circus.
That's it. I mean, we've grown up seeing politicians in Westminster, the old men all sitting there falling asleep. It just shows that like politics has completely moved on. I mean, would you encourage more women to get involved in the politics sector as well?
We desperately need more women involved. We need more of all underrepresented groups. So something we like to say is it's not so much a shortage of women, but an overrepresentation of older, rich, white men. What we need is more working class people, more people of color, more LGBTQ plus people, definitely more women, definitely more disabled people. Because right now what happens is laws are made by people who are already wealthy, often homeowners, who have never in their life suffered any sort of oppression and discrimination, and therefore they don't see it, they don't know that it exists. And people like myself who are able-bodied are totally blind to what disabled people face every single day. And the more people we have in Parliament that represent what Scotland really is, the better Parliament will be. So not just women, but a properly diverse Parliament is desperately needed. We can't make good laws unless our lawmakers look like the people who are going to have to live under those laws. Yeah,
so if someone is watching this, Lorna, and they think, you know what, I actually would like a go at politics, how do you go about becoming a politician?
So there's lots of different ways to be involved in politics. There's a lot of charities and campaigns, things, just local campaigns, stop fox hunting or to save a local playground, that kind of thing. So you can get involved in local politics. Communities in Scotland have community councils, which anybody can stand for election to get involved locally. That's not party politics. So you can just do that. You don't have to join a party. In fact, I think they don't allow parties. So there's lots of ways to get involved locally. You can work in politics. So politicians and political parties and charities and campaigns hire researchers to develop policy, who then come to lobby politicians and governments to do what they want. So if you care about something like a particular animal or a particular cause like homelessness, you can get involved that way. Or you can do what I've done, which is party politics. And that means you find a political party that I think you agree with their views, and you sign up. You go on the internet, find their website, pay your dues. For the Scottish Greens, that's £1. You join the party, and then from that point, it's kind of up to you. So we have some members who come along and help organize meetings and do things behind the scene, and then some people like myself who put themselves forward for election. If people are thinking about the Scottish Greens, they can contact me and I can help walk them through it. But every political party handles that kind of thing differently. So I can't tell you how the other parties do it, but once you're in the party, you would get all sorts of opportunities to get involved as well. Yeah,
I think the Daily Record newspaper, they've done a recent poll where the Scottish Greens are on track for a record result, fingers crossed, in May for you. Why do you think more and more people are starting to vote Greens?
I think there's two reasons for that. One is the firstly, that we've established a really solid track record. We've had Scottish Greens in the Scottish Parliament from the beginning, in every single parliamentary term. And so over the decades, we've started to rack up really clear wins where you can say, well, the Scottish Greens made a difference there. I can see what they're doing. Our work is really visible. As I say, we've been a constructive opposition. We don't just snipe from the sidelines. We get stuff done. And I think people like to see that. They recognize that. We also have Greens in councils all over Scotland now. And again, even having one Green on a council can make a difference because it means we have things like in the Highlands and Islands, one of the councils who has only one Green declared a climate emergency. And that wouldn't have happened without that Green there. So it does make people know that voting Green makes a difference. And the other part of it, I think we can thank Extinction Rebellion and our student climate strikers for making these issues mainstream. Because it's somewhat frustrating to have been, to be Green, because the Greens have been here for 30 years saying exactly what we've been saying. And unfortunately, if we had started making changes to our society 30 years ago, they would have been tiny, tiny changes, and we wouldn't be facing not only this huge climate catastrophe, but the really dramatic changes that we're going to have to make in a very short period of time in order to prevent that. So thank you to, the Young Climate Strikers and Extinction Rebellion for bringing that really into the mainstream consciousness. Climate crisis is on everybody's mind now.
Yeah, I don't know if this has been done, but it was just something I was thinking about the other day there. Obviously, with lockdown being in place, there's less and less people on the roads. Has there been any sort of research done to maybe show that with less cars on the road, that the universe, the planet's starting to maybe repair itself, or the climate's not disintegrating as quick as it was when all these cars were on the road?
So unfortunately, it's kind of already bounced back. So last year during the very strict lockdown, you could absolutely see that emissions dropped by about 6% during that time of lockdown, but now they're almost right back up where they were, it's really unfortunate. A lot of councils were very slow to implement the low traffic neighborhoods and the space for distancing to help bicycles and people get around. I know in Edinburgh, there was a lot of heel dragging around that. There was, the Lib Dems were trying to stop it from happening in a lot of places. So I think some councils have done really well. Some have really not stepped up to the challenge to reshaping our cities and towns that they could have done to deal with COVID. I just don't think that happened automatically. As a consequence, we still have to actually make those changes going ahead now. COVID's given us a bit of a wake-up call on it, but all by itself, no, it didn't really make enough difference.
So what can Joe Public like myself and other people do to try and make a positive impact on the environment? I know there's talk obviously of diesel cars being taken off the road in 10 years. Is electric cars and bicycles the way forward?
Well, I so much want to emphasize that there's almost nothing you as an individual can help. I mean, by all means, bicycle more and get yourself a bamboo toothbrush and so on. But most of your emissions are from things that you don't have a choice about. You don't get to choose how the steel you use is smelted, how much concrete is used in your city planning. You don't get to decide that the aviation industry will be subsidized, but the rail industry won't. Those aren't decisions that you as an individual can make. So the overwhelming amount of the emissions is not anything you as an individual can do anything about. It's not your fault. It's cheaper to fly down to London than it is to take the train. Governments have to do that. It's absolutely governments that have to do that. They have to take responsibility for it. If the rich, if Elon Musk and this crowd could have fixed climate change, they would have done it already, but they can't and they won't. So it has to be down to government. So the number one thing you can do is vote wisely.
And what a way to end the interview, I think that is. I obviously can't say who you should go out and vote for, but hopefully something we've discussed in the last 30 minutes has maybe sparked maybe a wee bit of ignition in the fire. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Lorna Slater.
Thank you so much.